Well, hello there. You're watching All 24 News, World News program with me, Karim Zachary, and up next are the top stories. Arab, Islamic and African nations reject the Zionist entity's move in Somalia, while Algeria calls it an attack on sovereignty. Also in our news, Farhat Mhenni Jr. rejects his father's terrorist act, sending a message of national unity while honoring his family's legacy in Algeria's War of Independence. Next up, Sudan's army retakes a North Kordofan town as monitors accuse the RSF forces of serious violations and ethnic cleansing in Darfur. And later on, Zelensky signals openness to compromise based on red lines as new talks are planned. The details shortly. Welcome back to the details. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, Somalia's presidency says President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud is holding diplomatic talks with East African leaders to counter any attempts to violate the country's sovereignty. In a statement, the presidency said Mogadishu is leading a wide regional and international diplomatic efforts to protect Somalia's unity and territorial integrity and to reject any external interference. Regional leaders, it added, voiced a unified position in support of Somalia's sovereignty, stressing the need for regional solidarity to safeguard the country's stability. For its part, the Arab League will hold an emergency meeting today, Sunday, to condemn the Zionist entity's recognition of a breakaway region in Somalia. Somalia's ambassador to the Arab League, Ali Abdi Awari, said the move is void, has no legal effect, and violates Somalia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghait described the step as provocative, a breach of international law, and a dangerous interference that could destabilize the region. For its part, Algeria strongly condemned the Israeli occupation authorities' recognition of the self-proclaimed Somaliland, calling it an illegal act that violates Somalia's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity. In a statement on Saturday, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said the move breaches the UN Charter and core African principles, particularly the inviolability of national borders, as upheld by the African Union. Algeria reaffirmed its full support for Somalia and warned that the decision could seriously undermine security and stability in Somalia and across the Horn of Africa. Similarly, several Arab states in separate and joint statements rejected the Zionist entity's declaration recognizing a separatist region in Somalia. Djibouti, Turkey, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait said the move violates international law, warning it could heighten tensions and security risks in the Horn of Africa. They reaffirmed their full support for Somalia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And at the public opinion level, Somalis voiced strong outrage over the Zionist entity's recognition of the so-called Somaliland, calling it a direct assault on national sovereignty. They said the move deeply wounds the country and reaffirmed that Somaliland remains an inseparable part of a unified Somalia.
I heard the news that Somaliland has obtained recognition from Israel, even though it has not gained full recognition from the world. This is unfortunate, as the Somali people and Somali territories today are seeking recognition from the Jews.
Recognition of Somaliland represents a deep wound for us, and we do not accept it and will not accept it. Somalia belongs to itself. There is no such thing as Somaliland.
And in the same way, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has condemned the entity's recognition of Somaliland as an independent state In a statement, the OIC rejected the move, calling it a violation of Somalia's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity. The organization expressed full solidarity with Somalia and its support for the country's legitimate institutions. The Gulf Cooperation Council also rejected the Zionist entity's recognition of the so-called Somaliland, calling it a dangerous breach of international law and a clear violation of Somalia's sovereignty. GCC Secretary General Jassim al-Budaywi said the move sets a destabilizing precedent that could fuel tensions and conflicts in the Horn of Africa, undermining regional and international efforts to maintain peace and security. For his part, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, rejected any move to recognize the so-called Somaliland as an independent entity, reaffirming the African Union's firm commitment to Somalia's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. In a statement, he warned that such actions violate core African Union principles and could set a dangerous precedent, threatening peace and stability across the continent. The Intergovernmental Authority on Development condemned any unilateral recognition that violates the UN Charter and African Union principles. In a statement on Saturday, IGAD rejected recognition of the so-called breakaway region and reaffirmed its firm support for Somalia's unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, as well as backing Somali efforts to strengthen peace, state institutions, and inclusive governance. And in light of these developments, we are joined live from Paris via Teams by Dr. Abdenour Toumi, a geopolitical analyst and MENA affairs expert. It's great to have you with us, Dr. Abdenour.
Good evening, and thank you for having me on the program.
Our pleasure. So my first question, with near universal condemnation from Africa to the Arab League, what concrete actions must follow the diplomatic outrage to make this recognition, let's say, meaningless?
Yeah, as you said, it is, legally, it is a violation of international law and all international convention, and also it's an aggression on sovereign state. But we all know now how the Zionist state's strategy is all about destabilizing and to promote more chaos and disintegration, like it has been doing actually across the region. And now it has moved further, in the Horn Africa. So now in that, and this is not new, the Zionist state, has close ties, and it has actually positioned itself for decades, and particularly has close ties with Eritrea, Djibouti. And so it does this, actually the timing, it is crucial because anyone who follows geopolitics actually understand why the Zionist leader, premier, by the way, who is under the ICC warrant of arrest for his war crimes that are committed in Gaza. So
is that the strategic calculation behind this timing? Maybe a distraction?
It is not necessarily a distraction, but it is a strategic move, actually, by supporting this secessionist movement and actually pushing for all the secessionist movement, as we saw in North Somalia now. And also, there are those news reports coming from Yemen, South Yemen. So, and both, actually, very interesting, are on the side of Bab el-Mandeb Strait, and Aden, and where, of course, I mean, it gives Red Sea where it meets the Arabian Sea. So all these elements are actually going with the new strategy of the Zionist state premier, and who is actually positioning himself as bullying the region and, of course, pushing for his quote-unquote new Middle East. So it is actually, one can say it is calculated political, geopolitical move, but also, I mean, even in terms of for him, for for domestic politics, it is aimed to again position himself and being the hero for his people, and also securing influence and more hegemony in these critical maritime corridors in the Red Sea. Adding to that, don't forget, I mean, the key element in this complex equation is about the resistance movement, the resistance forces who have been fighting the Zionist states. And for instance, I mean by this, the Houthis. So now this move by going and giving this quote-unquote recognition, and by the way, it's not recognition, not the legitimate diplomatic recognition, it's just a kind of protectorate, de facto an occupation of these the land of the north of sovereign state Somalia. So this to have more, again, as I said, close position to contain and therefore to get close in his fight with the Houthis in terms of intelligence and intelligence surveillance and military actions.
But we have seen a lot of reactions. I mean, it stirred controversy, and we have seen reactions from the Arab and Islamic world. And will the intense unified backlash that we are seeing against the Zionist entities recognition force maybe a swift reversal? Or has it already done something irreversible, some irreversible damage, let's say, to Somalia's political landscape?
Actually, from the Zionist state perspective, I mean, it doesn't care about that. I mean, they don't care, actually, and especially this premier, I mean, he doesn't care about any ramifications. And I said, I mean, he has been bullying the region for actually almost 2 decades, and lately in his carnage and genocide in Gaza. So, and when it comes to the role of the main actors, actually, and the neighbors, when you mentioned Arabs and Muslims leaders who are, I mean, condemning this illegal act, I mean, that's fine, but don't forget, I mean, to some extent, those leaders, particularly the Arab League and some Arab leaders, did forget Somalia for a long time. And since the fall of the dictator of Somalia, Mohammed Said Barre, in 1991. And I mean, since then, I mean, Somalia entered into very, very bloody civil war, and almost Somalia has disappeared from the Arab politics and geopolitics until, I would say, after 2006, 2007, until the appearance and the role of Turkey, who did play a major role to rebuild Somalia economically and gave another ray of hope for politics and to rebuild Somalia's sovereign state institutions. So this is just between parentheses, because some Arab leaders have a responsibility about what is going on about the GAN, and also letting the Zionist states premier and kind of having a free ride in the region and going after these quote-unquote normalization processes and what we call it commonly now the Abraham Accords, in which, from the Zionist state perspective, it's not about peace, it's not about security nor stability, it's all about capitulation. Therefore, to implement his agenda and go forward and destabilize the entire region.
Clear. Thank you indeed, Dr. Abdelnour Toumi. Thank you for all these insights. You were live with us from Paris.
Thank you.
In our other news, Algeria called on all parties in Yemen to show responsibility, restraint, and commitment to dialogue to restore security, stability, and preserve the country's unity and sovereignty. The Foreign Ministry expressed concern over developments in El Mahra and Hadramaut, warning of potential threats to Yemen's stability and national unity. Algeria also reaffirmed its support to reaffirmed its support to peaceful diplomatic efforts to prevent further escalation. For his part, the UN Special Envoy to Yemen actually expressed, Hans Grunberg, said on Saturday that developments in Hadramaut and El Mahra are being closely monitored. He reiterated UN Security General Antonio Guterres' call for restraint and dialogue to prevent escalation, highlighting the ongoing regional mediation and continued escalation, highlighting all the regional mediation and engagement with Yemeni and regional parties to work toward a comprehensive, inclusive political solution. Moving on to another story now. At the national level, the son of Farhat Mohanni, the leader of the terrorist group MAK, told Algerian state television that he is proud of his family's legacy, especially role in the Algerian Revolution, calling his ancestors heroes who fought for national unity and the country's liberation. Let's take a listen.
Aujourd'hui, je franchis le pas.
Today I'm taking this step. It is a personal necessity and a way for me to clear my name in light of everything that is happening, to clear the honor of my family, who are also completely uninvolved in all of this. And it is also a way for me to contribute to the national unity of my country.
Contribuer à l'unité nationale de mon pays.
Agour Mohanni also said he has a personal and intellectual rift with his father, noting that his father's positions caused problems for him and his siblings and do not reflect their own beliefs.
Ma mère m'a beaucoup parlé de...
My mother often told me the story of her father and the role of my grandmothers played during the War of Independence, and actually, they themselves had told me about it. But I was too young that I only have fake memories. My mother told me a lot and filled in those details. For me, they are heroes, especially after everything I have heard. They played a very active role during the Algerian War. My grandparents did too.
Pendant la guerre d'Algérie.
In the same line of thought, Agour Mohanni said his father's positions do not represent him, and he holds, and along his siblings, no affiliation. He added that his testimony seeks to restore his family's reputation and support national unity.
Mon père, il a ses idées. Mon père, c'est mon père.
My father has his ideas. My father is my father. He has his ideas. And I have my own ideas too. I have suffered my whole life because of his ideas and his decisions, which always had repercussions on my life and the lives of my brothers. Today, I feel I must take independence, the independence of my own ideas. I have to express them, and I must not be associated with everything my father decides.
Pas être associé à tout ce que mon père prend comme décision.
Moving on to another development, Algerian Prime Minister Sifin said President Abdelmajid Tebboune is committed to positioning Algeria as a key gateway to Africa, a reliable economic hub and a center upholding transparency, accountability, and integrity. Speaking at a forum on legal security and its impact on economic development on Saturday, Rieb emphasized the president's focus on creating a stable legal environment to encourage investment, entrepreneurship, and innovation.
يسعدني أن أتواجد بينكم اليوم.
I am pleased and honored to be among you today in the framework of this important event and to take part in the activities of this forum, which examines the issue of legal security and its impact on economic development. This forum is held under the high patronage of His Excellency the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, who attaches great importance to this vital issue and has emphasized it on many occasions as it reflects his sound reform vision and Algeria's determination to establish a secure and stable legal environment. Such an environment facilitates and simultaneously encourages investment, initiative and innovation, thereby contributing to the upgrading of the national economy and strengthening Algeria's position as a strategic gateway to Africa and a reliable economic hub that is legally secure. This approach is further reinforced through the consolidation of three fundamental principles: transparency, accountability and integrity. This forward-looking vision aims to make Algeria a model in linking knowledge and innovation with law and development, while removing barriers between the public and private sectors and enhancing integration between them. The ultimate goal is to create a business and investment-friendly environment based on transparency, efficiency and competitiveness in support of sustainable development and increased confidence in the national legal system.
موثوقا اقتصاديا وآمنا قانونيا.
On the same occasion, the Algerian Prime Minister also affirmed Algeria's determination to build a strong, competitive and integrated economy grounded in trust and the rule of law.
إن هذه النظرة الجديدة.
This new vision, introduced by His Excellency the President of the Republic, takes into account the specificities of economic activity and keeps pace with the transformations currently shaping the national economy, particularly in light of the strong momentum generated by the major and structuring projects underway in various sectors. These projects aim to strengthen economic sovereignty and protect the national interest, the integration between the legal and judicial fields on the one hand, and the economic, investment and entrepreneurial spheres on the other. Alongside the digital transformation that accompanies all these reforms does not merely reflect a technical choice. Rather, it represents a comprehensive state project seeking to establish a strong, competitive, diversified and integrated economy founded on trust and grounded in a legal framework that protects and supports ethical practices while encouraging economic growth and freedom of initiative.
الذي يحمي ويرافق العمل النزيه ويشجع النمو الاقتصادي وحرية المبادرة.
And in another topical development, the Sudanese army said on Saturday that it regained control of the Dangouj area north of Al Ubaid in North Kordofan hours after Rapid Support Forces RSF entered. Military sources told Ultra Sudan that army forces repelled RSF units that had advanced at dawn toward Kordofan cities following the deployment of multiple combat formations. Sudan's Dar Hamar emergency room accused the Rapid Support Forces of serious violations in Wad Banda, West Kordofan. The group said RSF members abducted civilians for ransom, carried out financial extortion, looted property, and disrupted local service institutions. For its part, the Sudanese Doctors Network reported that the Rapid Support Forces killed over 200 people, including women and children, in North Darfur. In a Saturday statement, the network said survivors arriving at displacement camps in Chad's Tina region recounted attacks in Ambrou, Sarba, and Abu Kumra, calling the killings a blatant violation of humanitarian and international law. Moving on now to the file of Gaza, where the Israeli occupation carried out intensive airstrikes on southern and central areas on Saturday, violating the ceasefire again. Palestinian media reported attacks on Rafah near the Maghazi refugee camp alongside gunfire from Zionist military vehicles in eastern Khan Yunis and eastern Gaza City. Meanwhile, winter rains are making life in Gaza's displacement camps even more desperate. Families are struggling in fragile tents, dozens reported death from hypothermia or collapsing homes, and few safe places are left amid the widespread destruction. Here's Zahra Farjani with a report.
In Gaza, A gloomy sky hangs over one of many displacement camps as families brace for another round of rain. Thousands of people across the Gaza Strip are living in makeshift shelters built from thin tarps and pieces of wood, weakened after months of exposure to harsh weather.
We have been living in this tent for 2 years. Every time it rains, the tent collapses over our heads and we try to fix it with new pieces of wood. With prices so high and no income, we can barely afford clothes for our children or mattresses to sleep on. Our tent is torn everywhere. Every time it rains, it collapses and we have to repair it again.
Inside the camp, clothes hang outside tents in an attempt to dry, while water seeps through visible holes in the fabric overhead.
We live in a tent and the severe cold is consuming us. I have a family member who suffers from cancer. She cannot tolerate the cold and has no proper clothes or protection. Every time it rains, we drown.
Blankets and carpets are piled on the ground inside tents, some already covered in mold, as children sit nearby despite water flooding the floor.
I collect nylon, cardboard and plastic from the streets to keep them warm. They don't have proper covers. It's freezing. The humidity is high and water seeps in from everywhere. I don't know what to do.
As winter intensifies, conditions in Gaza's displacement camps continue to deteriorate, with dozens of deaths reported from hypothermia and weather-related building collapses, while widespread destruction leaves families with few safe places to seek shelter in.
In Morocco, protests against normalization continue on the 5th anniversary of Rabat's deal with the Zionist entity. At a Friday sitting outside Parliament, activists accused the Makhzen regime of imposing normalization and undermining national institutions, pledging to continue demonstrations until all ties are severed. For its part, the Moroccan BDS movement reported spotting over 20 ships carrying weapons in Tangiers port and called on emirs to stop using Moroccan ports to supply the Zionist entity, accusing the regime of complicity in the Palestinian genocide. In other regional news, Libya's government president of national unity, Abdulhamid Dbeiba, said investigations continue into the plane crash that killed Chief of Staff Mohammed al-Haddad and 4 companions. Speaking at a memorial on Saturday at the Ministry of Defense in Tripoli, Dbeiba said the probe will be closely monitored to uncover the full circumstances of the crash, which occurred last Tuesday on the return from Turkey. On the same occasion, Libya's Presidential Council head and Army Supreme Commander Mohammed al-Manfi called for unity to face what he described as imminent challenges for the country. Speaking at the same memorial for the Chief of General Staff and companions killed in a plane crash in Turkey, al-Manfi said defending Libya's sovereignty requires solidarity and a state whose will cannot be hijacked. And in another topical development, Kiev faced a night of nearly 10 hours of Russian drone and missile strikes while President Volodymyr Zelensky heads to Florida for high-stakes talks with U.S. President Donald Trump, aiming to secure security guarantees and advance a peace plan. Here's Salman Sibno.
Last night was a long, tense one of the Ukrainians in Kiev, who endured nearly 10 hours of relentless drone and missile strikes by Russian forces. Authorities say almost 500 drones and 40 missiles targeted the capital, leaving at least 2 dead and 32 injured. And as the city reeled from the bombardment, President Volodymyr Zelensky is on his way to Florida for crucial talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. On a brief stop in Canada, Zelensky secured an additional $2.5 billion in aid and said he hopes for a constructive meeting in the U.S. He confirmed the possibility of reaching a middle ground in settlement talks, but stressed that any deal must include security guarantees that respect Kyiv's red lines in the conflict.
We must work to reduce the number of unresolved issues. There are clear red lines for Ukraine and its people today. I'm confident that there are settlement proposals from the Americans, and we know them. Our enemy likely has its known objectives. and we are aware of those as well. These matters are extremely sensitive territory at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. You know my position. We will not recognize anything legally. The main question is what the security guarantees President Trump is prepared to offer Ukraine. I would be truly grateful if his decision aligns with our wishes.
In the revised 20-point US-Ukrainian peace plan, which includes the potential proposal to turn the Donbass into a free economic zone, one of the most contentious issues on the table. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will also join a Saturday call with Zelensky, Trump and other European leaders to discuss the latest developments in Washington-led negotiations. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that Ukraine is not in a hurry to end the war, claiming Russian forces are making progress along the front lines and intensifying pressure in multiple directions.
The Russian armed forces are carrying out all these tasks assigned to them during their military operations. They are making good progress along the front line and increasing pressure on Ukrainian forces in all directions. The liberation of the towns of Dmitrov and Hulyapol opens up good prospects for launching an offensive in the Zaporizhzhia region.
Tomorrow's meeting in Florida is under close scrutiny, with the Donbass region and security guarantees expected to dominate discussions. Bolstered by support from European leaders and Canada's Prime Minister, Zelensky will seek to persuade Trump that his proposals could open a path to peace. Yet, significant obstacles remain, and Moscow's warning of a military resolution if diplomacy falters underscores that achieving a lasting settlement will be anything but straightforward.
And finally in our news, the United States is stepping up military pressure on Venezuela, triggering strong reactions from Caracas and drawing international warnings over the risk of escalation and threats to regional stability. Sofia Kinturi has more.
Since late August, US warships, sanctions, and oil embargoes have increased pressure on Caracas, raising fears of wider confrontation. Maduro insists these efforts to steal Venezuela's resources will fail and says US support for certain opposition leaders have faltered. Despite the sanctions, Venezuelan oil operations continue. Reuters reports that tankers are still docking off the coast, while the El Palito refinery pumps 20,000 to 30,000 barrels per day to meet fuel needs in central and western regions.
Es imposible.
It is impossible for sectors of US power to fabricate a virtual reality and impose on Bolivar's Venezuela a model of colonial and slave domination to steal its natural resources. That is impossible because here there are people settled in the territory, in communities, in universities and in factories, and these people have demonstrated sufficient capacity to lead our homeland on a good path, at a good pace and with good judgment.
A buen ritmo, en buen tino.
The crisis is drawing attention across the Caribbean. Dominica's President Silvani Borton urged Washington to hold its aggression actions, emphasizing that dialogue and peaceful solutions are the only way forward.
Every government must be respected. Our appeal to the US is to let there be discussions. Let us sit at the table instead of having wars, instead of trying to remove governments in power, instead of moving to each other's country because we are smaller than you and you are more equipped than us and bullying us into submission. And so for us in the Caribbean, we are calling on the US to cease that aggression against Venezuela.
For her part, Russia's foreign ministry accused the US of reviving piracy and banditry by intercepting Venezuelan tankers, while hoping for pragmatism from Washington to avoid disaster.
We constantly advocate for de-escalation, maintenance of trusting relationship, and predictability. It is important not to let events develop in a destructive way. We hope that the pragmatism and rationality of the US President Donald Trump will allow solutions to be found that are mutually acceptable to the parties within the framework of international legal norms.
China has also weighed in, warning that arbitrary tanker interceptions risk destabilizing global energy markets and creating security concerns.
China has always opposed the arbitrary levy of unilateral sections and the so-called long-arm jurisdiction by certain countries. The arbitrary interception of other countries' oil tankers might not only disrupt the normal operation of the international energy market, but also potentially cause other security risks. Venezuela's engagement in economic and trade cooperation with other countries within the framework of international law is normal, reasonable, and lawful, and this right should be respected and deserve support.
With major powers speaking out, the Venezuela-US confrontation is no longer just regional. The standoff now raises wider questions over sovereignty, energy, security, and the balance of power in the Caribbean.
And that's the end of our news. Thank you for watching and goodbye.